Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Platformers live stream. Today, we are excited to have with us Tao Hansen. He's a dev advocate at Lego and a personal friend of me and Guy. And we are so happy to have you here. Today, we're going to talk about cloud development environments, what they are, why do we need them, what types of CDs are available in the open source and the commercial space, and what best ways you can use them too. Tao, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us what are CDs?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Tao. I'm leading the developer advocacy team here at the Lego Group. You can see some Lego sets behind me that we put up. What are CDEs? CDEs are cloud development environments, and what that means is if you can imagine taking your laptop, right, and it has all of the developer tools that you would otherwise install locally, but instead it's running on somebody else's machine, right? So it's just like the cloud normally, but it's taking your whole development environment that you would otherwise need to configure, and it's putting it up there. Um, yeah, and I'm a big fan. We've been playing around with them here at the group, and we have a few teams using them. And I think I got started uh, using them back when I was at Garden, my previous employer.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
that's
so do
when
you
we met. Sorry, Guy, go ahead.
no, so do you tell me like when we like set up our laptop and try to commit for the first time and trying to run our build for the first time, it always fail. Like there's always the software that is not in the right version from the
Yeah.
version like the latest that works, and you installed always not the right version and something breaks up for you. So you can tell me like CDEs are kind of eliminate this challenge from me.
Yeah, I mean, they can, so if you, let's say that you have a CDE and you have a lot of developers using the same cloud development environment, right? You have a configuration. We can look into that a little bit later. And you'd hand this configuration out to your developers, and then they would start it up. Um, if if one of those packages that you've defined fails, then it fails to install for all of them. So so it's a global issue. But I mean, what one of the big frustrations, especially like if you're a Pythonista, um, is pinning packages and then making sure that like your package versions are in line with the package versions that the rest of your team is using, right? And so what happens if a developer updates the pinned package dependencies for the repo that the team is working on, and then another teammate, in order to get working on that repo, they have to upgrade their packages locally. So there's a lot of time lost just making sure that everybody's packages are up to date, right? Did they update them or not? Oh, okay, they've run into an error. Ah, right, I forgot to update my packages, right? So there's a whole, it just solves for like a whole mess of issues that would otherwise occur just by giving, saying, okay, this is something for the team, and then the team just goes in and it's ready to go. Yeah.
That's amazing. So you explain a little bit about the benefit of like eliminate the need or eliminate the versioning, but let's talk a little bit about all the benefits. Like, what do you think are the most things that can benefit us when we are working with CDEs?
Yeah. So um, one of my favorite benefits is onboarding. So dramatically reduce onboarding in especially if you work at like a big enterprise like the Lego Group. You have a lot of employees, right? And there's also a lot of employees onboarding all the time, and that those hours, I mean, it's not hours, like, let's be honest with ourselves, it's days that developers spend configuring their machine, making sure that they have everything they need to get going. With a cloud development environment, you literally just need a web browser, right? And that comes out of the box with most people's machines. So you're talking about, a dramatic time savings of maybe a week or perhaps 3 days. You're also talking about reduced differentiation. So think about all the different operating systems that developers are running at a startup, right? So a startup, for example, you might see Linux users, you might see Windows users, you might see Mac OS users, and all of those machines have different ways of consuming packages, right? And so you have to share docs about, hey, if you're running Linux, if you're running this flavor of Linux, use this package manager to install these packages. If you're running Mac OS, install Homebrew, install these packages. So it's all of these cloud development environments are running one OS, the best operating system, in my opinion, Linux, right? But they're all running Linux. So, I think it's really funny how like Mac, I've seen, over the years how operating systems popularity have sort of come and went, and people are saying, oh, when is the year of Linux going to arrive? It's been here, we're running, it's already here.
It's like the summer of Bitcoin.
Yeah, the summer of Bitcoin.
No, it's way past that. The Linux is like, it's so way past that people don't even care about Linux anymore. Like they don't know that it's running under the hood.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the way that we want it to be, right? It's just so generic, it's so boring that nobody even knows or cares because it's
exactly
it's doing its job. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, I want you to take a step back and share with us, if you can, if you've ever experienced the shift from like the regular software development lifecycle, developing locally, like saying it works on my machine, and that world. If you've seen the shift in your career in past companies or currently. Have you ever had that experience?
Yeah, so we never quite arrived there at my previous employer, but I think that something that I've observed now, where I work now, is that teams are actually opting in big enterprise settings. They have dealt with so many, let's say bug reports about, this particular issue on this particular operating system, that what I've observed is teams rolling out dev containers, which we will talk about shortly, as a solution for solving for this, basically dealing with so many issues that are particular to an operating system. So they've just managed to like eliminate all, a whole class of GitHub issue that they would normally have to deal with by popping in a dev container, which is then consumed by teams, and then those issues are closed. So I have noticed that. I have.
So let's just make sure that we understand. So we talked about quick onboarding, like we can get any laptop from anyone and just go into development as fast as we can. So it's eliminate like both maybe the hardware, and both the operating system. So it's not only Mac, it's also the Mac hardware. Maybe it comes with M1 processor and maybe someone else using some Intel processor, and that's like AMD or ARM. So we eliminate that. We allow people to onboard much faster. We also eliminate some of the requirements from development tools and packages management on top of that. So actually, we can get all of this stack and all of the benefits of not being rely on our laptop when we are using CDs. Am I got you right?
Yes, and so I'll just mention one additional benefit, which is that in some cloud development environments, not all of them, but in some of them, your network topology is exactly the same as your deployment network topology. So what I mean by that is developers are on their machines, right? They're on their machines in their office, wherever they are in the world. They have to get their images that they build, like, I would say a large majority of software developers today, maybe not a large majority, but many software developers are packaging their their software as a container, right? And then they're building their image locally, perhaps, and then they're sending it off to an image registry, right? And that image registry is going to live somewhere else, and it's usually a few countries over, whatever the data center is of the image registry. With some cloud development environments, it's the same. So it's within the same. So you'd build your image and you'd ship it, but it's in the same data center. So it's just going, and so you're talking like multi-gigabyte image files that are transferred instantaneously or almost instantaneously, right? So there's so much time savings that we don't actually think about, or that might not be immediately obvious by adopting CDEs.
Wow, that's amazing. Like I even not thought about the fact that when you are remote, it's not only the underlying things that you need, but also the networking and all the benefits of working on real data centers and not laptop with shitty Wi-Fi and whatever.
Exactly, so, right.
So it's really amazing, but what are those? Like, what are those dev containers, and what is the thing? Like, how can I get this magic?
Yeah, should we bring up the container spec maybe for the viewers, and then we can walk through it. So yeah, the dev containers is a open spec. It's an open specification that was created by Microsoft, and it specifies essentially the containers that software developers know and love, but with some additions. And those additions are written in a JSON file. I think that Microsoft is using a JSON with comments. I don't know why they're not just using JSON 5, but they've decided to use JSON with comments. So it's just standard JSON with comments supported. And so what you do is it's in a .devcontainer.json file. You define things like entry points, things like additional packages that you might want to make available, extensions. If you're using, for example, Visual Studio Code, so then it could be like a list of extensions that you want pre-installed in your development environment. And this is a totally open specification. So I really applaud Microsoft for taking the step here to make this spec open, because it's allowed for just an entire ecosystem of products to develop around the dev container spec.
Yeah, so let me show an example of dev container spec.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite
we just shared the link to this repo in the comments if anyone wants to check it out together with us. And by the way, feel free to leave questions in the comments below, and Tao will get to them at some point throughout the stream.
Yeah, so in here we got all the spec itself, right? How we can use, what do we need to define? Maybe we can find some an example near, or try to take a look.
Does here, I can show you. Are you able to see this little repo that I have? If I share this,
you can send it to me on the chat, and I will.
There it is, guy.
You see it?
Oh,
little bits of Buddha.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is something. This was just a silly. It's not at all advanced. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to write. So this was like when the OpenAI API was first released, and I wanted to write a Telegram bot because my wife and I use Telegram to communicate, and I wanted to write her a bot that she could interact with and ask for like Buddhist wisdom, right? So So that's the story behind this name. But what I've ended up turning it into is kind of like a demonstration for all these technologies, because I love tech. So you can see here, like here's a dev container.json, and you can either keep it at the top level of the repository, or you can keep it in a folder called .dev container, right? So that's what I did here, and you can see that I have a list of extensions. Can everybody see all right? Should I zoom in a little bit? Yeah.
No,
Okay.
if you want, you can zoom in, but I think I can see it
Zoom in
fine.
just a touch. Okay. So you can see I have a series of extensions here, and one of them is Cody AI. So I can get my AI Copilot in ready to go as soon as I launch this. You can see I've defined an image here. So you can define either a pre-built image, and this is something that GitHub Codespaces allows, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But a pre-build basically is you are defining. So you define two dev container.jsons, and the first one is the one that you want your CDE to pre-build, right? So that means that instead of your developers having to wait for Codespaces to build the image on demand, you can give it a pre-build, and then the image will build itself, let's say, on every new code change in the repository, right?
Wow.
So that just makes it even faster for developers to get going. And so you can see I've commented this container file, and it's just a standard Docker file. It's everything that you are familiar with if you've worked with Docker files or container files before, but with some additions to allow the user to work inside the container image, because container images are usually quite restrictive. So
so I guess so from the background sound, so we define this dev container, we build the container itself, and then maybe, so I guess that only a few people within the organization actually do that. It's most of the people, maybe the DevOps team or the developer experience team do that.
Or it might just be automatic if there's a GitHub Actions pipeline.
Automatic, but someone maybe created a new. By the way, I can see Matthew comment that he got some questions. So Matthew, feel free to post the question on the chat, and we will bring him up live in here. Just comment them.
Absolutely. Or a platform engineering team would likely be responsible for something like this guy.
So they will define that. So okay, and then we can run it on whatever, Kubernetes. What would be our target environment to run those?
Right. So that depends on the cloud development environment that you've chosen. And I mean, should we get into the different solutions available out there? Or
Sure. But maybe we can take a quick stop to answer Matthew's first question.
Sure.
So Matthew asked, could you combine dev containers with TTL/sh for local development?
Interesting. That's the first I've heard of TTL.sh, so I'm just looking at it now.
Yeah, you looked kind of confused.
Docker image registry, it says. Okay.
It's the first time I heard about it too, to be honest.
Matthew, is this essentially this is a hosted image registry that is free for anyone to push to, but it's ephemeral, so the images have a short TTL. They have a short time to live. Is that correct?
Let's wait for him to answer. I see he got another question, so maybe Matt, when you find
the second one is easier, I think. So we can answer this one quickly and come back to the first one.
Could you consume secure containers?
Yeah, could you consume secure containers from a service like ChainGuard?
I think the answer is yes.
Really
No?
good questions. Yeah, I mean, I think so. You could use, okay, so actually, I do have the answer to this question. I like ChainGuard. I've met their team. They're great folks. The answer is that you can use a ChainGuard image as your base image, and then you can extend it to support, for example, like not a privileged user, but a local user that has permissions to access the folders that you want to give access to, right? So essentially, with a dev container, you need to create a, if you're familiar with Linux, in a Linux OS, you have users, right? And users have their home folders, and in those home folders, a user is allowed to do, most things, right? Because they're permissioned to. It's the same idea inside a dev container or a container image. So an image like ChainGuard will be super restricted because that's ChainGuard's MO, right? Is that they vend secure images, but that doesn't mean that you can't extend them. So dev containers allow you to have multi-stage Docker files, and so what you can do is you can use it as a base, and then you can permission a local user home directory, right? I hope I've made that clear.
No, no, I think it's pretty clear. By the way, I think it's helpful to clarify that the fact that you're using dev container doesn't mean that your product will be packed in the same container. So you can maybe have, I don't want to do any bad practice for anyone, but you may have some vulnerabilities or some things that are unsecured on your environment. But when you build your product or your software, it can be on a different container. Obviously, it's better to have everything secured in both of the cases, but those are different containers as far as I understand. Tao, feel free to correct me.
Yes. So, with the power of multi-stage Docker files, you can define, let's say, a production stage, right? And the production stage will move from, let's say, the build stage, but you might have a stage that is just for the dev container, and that would be a, let's say, more permissive environment, right? But the production stage is never looking to build from the, let's say, the dev container stage. It would only ever build from the build stage. So you're keeping you're keeping a tight separation of concerns, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Perfect. So, like, one thing I wanted to ask you, like, we know there are other solutions that are more trying to do more consistent, like, a flow of development, but without using dev containers. Can you elaborate a little bit about those and what the difference between them?
Yes. So I suppose this is a place where I would maybe rep my other favorite technology.
Oh, yeah,
which
sure,
is
sure.
Nix,
Sorry.
right? Yeah. No, yeah. I think we're talking the same language here. So Nix is my other favorite technology. And Nix actually started a long time ago, but it's I think it just had its 10th year anniversary. And it was started as a college, I think it was like a university thesis.
Oh, wow.
But
I wasn't aware of that.
where the creator of Nix is basically suggesting a way of building, so building packages that are pure, functional, and reproducible, or declarative, I think. So point being is, what Nix allows for is that everything is a hash. And so you can, anything that is unique will have its own hash. And so if another developer, let's say, on the Faroe Islands, I'm just going to assume this developer is on the Faroe Islands, if they build it could be a package, for example, the package, let me see if we can show an example of this. So Nix build hash. And when people see this for the first time, it looks unusual. It looks like something that they've never seen before.
Yeah, because when we sometimes think about development environment and how we ship things into somewhere, you always want to have it consistent all along the way. But
exactly.
on the other side, it's very hard to do that. So
yeah,
you need to put in a lot of effort, because if you install, 5 or 10 packages, you can even I know with Python or with any JavaScript like npm, you can make it like bigger than one version. But actually, when someone try to use it and you haven't pinned the version, and even if you pin the version, there can be slight difference between architecture, CPU architecture. Those are different. So I'm sharing the Nix build that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Like
So if we look at this string that I've highlighted, it's what's called a Nix store path, and the Nix store is its own directory structure. So the top level directory is Nix, and then store, and then you're going to have a hash, which is, you can see that long string of letters and numbers, and then there's the name of the package. So the name of the artifact in this case is test, right? But the hash determines, it's just like when we're, if we want to be sure that that an object or an artifact or an output is truly unique, then we can hash it, and based on that hash return, we can determine if it matches, let's say, another package build that another developer built in the Faroe Islands. So that this allows for some really powerful workflows akin to what Docker and containers enables, which is this kind of highly restricted or a high separation of concerns, right? Because you can be sure that this package build, if it doesn't match the hash string in exactly of this package that the other developer wrote, then it needs to, it's going to have to, it's not the same. So they have to rebuild it.
So does it help me with the shipment or the ease of use of those artifacts, or you just sign the artifact, give me the hash, and now you should verify it?
Right. So you would use Nix in a team. You would use it with another technology, like, for example, DevBox. So we can maybe, can we bring up DevBox?
Yeah.
And then I'll. So there's a few.
Website?
Yeah.
Cool.
There's a few technologies out there for working with Nix in teams, and DevBox is my favorite of all of them, and that it uses Nix to power reproducible developer environments without Docker. So what Docker is solving for, right, in these container images that you hand out to all of your devs, and they've come from the same build, you can see here that Nix is solving the same problem space, but instead of using containers, it's using these build hashes that I mentioned. It's using the power of the Nix store to create these reproducible developer environments. So you can be sure that, for example, when you take when you share, you'd share like a devbox.json file, also a JSON file with your teammate, you can be sure that your builds your versions are going to be exactly the same, right? And so that solves for that whole class of issues.
That's amazing, and like it really helps with using all the flow. I think it's by Jetpack, right? Like this.
Yeah, they used to be called Jetpack. I think they changed their name to Jetify recently.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
But just to give you an example of, if you're familiar with Docker Compose, which is a way of sort of composing multiple services that you're working on that each is a container, right? You might have, let's say, if in a 3-tier architecture, you've got, a front end, you've got a database, and then you've got a back end, right? In Docker Compose, you would list those images. Well, in DevBox, you would use something called Process Compose. So it's the same sort of thing, but instead of using containers as your building block, you're using binaries that you have running
Wow.
locally on your own machine. So it's kind of
Yeah.
going the other way to solve the issue, right? It's
Yeah.
empowering the developer on their local machine to do the same sort of workflows, accomplish the same workflows that a Docker-powered developer would. Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny because what I thought is that it's amazing how we make our progress into containers and cloud and everything remote and be efficient at the data center, but at the same time we are going into binaries with ashes and make it sure those are streamlined as we used to do it. And I hope the next level would not be punch cards to be really secure and and works
You have
efficiently.
to like write the program down.
You need to have spreadsheets as an intermediary step.
Yeah.
Before going to punch cards.
I started my career with mainframe, so I know a little bit about punch card, and that's we don't want to go back there.
Yeah, I never got to do mainframes, but I've always been sort of curious from a distance,
We
Maybe in
can
another
we can do a live stream on Kubernetes on mainframes or mainframe platforms, but I'm not sure we will have anyone to watch. So, but we can take it offline, and I would be happy to teach you a little bit about mainframe.
Mobile enthusiasts. Yeah.
You made Lydia laugh.
So we have a question from the audience about securities of CDEs. So is there anything else about those, or can we go back to CDEs before we answer the question?
Well, how do you defend security concerns? I mean, I suppose it's like, what security concern are you defending against, right? I mean, this is sort of the question that I would ask. Is your security concern the developer's laptop? Well, in that case, you're actually more secure with a CDE if you're working, let's say, in a highly restricted, like DoD environment, right? The Defense Department. And we see that. I mean, I know that there are very secure industries that are exclusively using things like cloud development environments for their developers, because in fact, I think that actually now any Googlers listening to this, please correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I understand it, when you go to Google, you get the choice of machine that you want. I think most often they give you a Chromebook, but the environment is a CDE. It's Google's cloud development environment. So they're comfortable giving their developers Chromebooks because from their perspective, that's the most secure thing they can hand out, since the CDE is entirely controlled by Google's security team, right? And various supporting teams.
Yeah.
Is there an argument to be made for like why we should be absolutely working exclusively on CDs, whether it's security-wise or velocity-wise, standardization? Like, there's so many different benefits, but is there like a argument that it's a must?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very good question, Udi, and it's one that I've thought of a lot for myself. I mean, I think that developers, I think we're getting into a fear of developers, right? So there's a blog, maybe we should bring this up, called "Localhost is Dead."
Oh my God.
Oh, the end of localhost. And it was written by
Yeah.
a someone who's pretty popular in the community, who goes by Swix. It's called "The End of Localhost," and this made
I
it
will
to the
share
Hacker
it.
News front page. And it got a lot of comments. A lot of people were really upset. They were really, passionate about that localhost was, localhost as in their local computers, because developers don't want to feel like they can't do something, right? Developers want to feel creatively empowered, right? So this is actually one of the blog articles that got me kind of interested in. I was interested before, but this article came out, and then I could see it became a hot button topic while I was working at Garden. And this got all of us thinking, at Garden about, what's the value of localhost versus a hybrid environment, a fully remote environment like a cloud development environment gives you. A lot of the answers came back in the Hacker News article. Well, what if the internet goes down, right? But that's such a rare occurrence. I need to code on a plane. Swix actually addresses that here. So
Yeah.
there's, I think that the developers who are passionate about preserving localhost, I think they have a point. But I also think that it's not as dire as they suggest. I think that we are looking at a very multimodal future where developers might choose to, imagine if we can talk about code spaces maybe shortly, because, imagine the vision of GitHub, right? The vision of GitHub is they want to empower developers starting with the repository as sort of the base unit, right? And the base unit is, so, a developer goes into their repository, and that's kind of like the launching pad for everything, right? So they'll go to the web page for the repository, and then they'll just click a button and they'll launch a code space. And that has everything they need to get going on this particular repository. Now, that doesn't mean that we're taking your power away as a developer. That just means that we're providing a set of sort of tested, like a tested environment that is ready to go. You can quickly create a pull request. Maybe it's a short pull request. Maybe you just want to fix a typo, or maybe it's something that you could get done in a couple hours. You might not necessarily want to pull in all those dependencies to your local machine. And pollute your local host with all of these dependencies that you're going to throw out anyway, right? So I see us as using the right tool for the right job, and not necessarily going all in on cloud development environments or all in on localhost. I think the future looks like a hybrid of the two approaches.
Yeah, that's true. By the way, I think that I don't think, like in one of the previous live streams we did full demo using dev containers. We used GitHub code spaces, and what we did is that what was really good is that everything set up, like we had to run kind cluster, we had to bring the binary into that code space, and we were able to actually develop and add a few things like really fast and explore that and do some live coding using those. So that's really great. Maybe you will be able to show us later something. But
yeah, I can actually launch a code space for you right now if we're ready for it, or we can talk about something else. Yeah.
Maybe we can understand.
I just want to highlight your point, Tao, because it's so important not to be dogmatic. And oftentimes people are like, no, this is the way. The DevOps is dead now. Platform engineering, or like they have this very dramatic theatrical statements that don't like hold water in real life, because you have to be flexible, you have to be pragmatic, and use what you have in the most efficient way.
Yeah,
help you do your job.
how many times throughout history have we been led astray by people saying, this is the one true way?
Yeah, too many times.
So many times. We just keep repeating history, Yeah.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about the technologies out there before we are going into the demo.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have a few folks from Gitpod in
Oh.
the audience, actually. So it is one of the tools we are about to mention.
It is one of the tools we're about to mention. Gitpod. We have a.
So let us know a little bit, like, what are the technologies out there? Like, you mentioned a lot about the abstracts of them. You mentioned a few technologies, but what is available out there for us to grab and use even immediately?
So what I'll do is I'll do a real quick. I've actually have all these environments already set up. Gitpod too for you Gitpodders out there. So I will just present.
Sure.
And let me
share
see.
a screen and we will bring it on stage.
Yeah, I think I'm going to share my whole screen. I'm just going to drag out any of my work tabs so that I don't leak highly confidential information. No, there's nothing confidential here. Okay, and I'm going to share. We'll just share this whole. Yeah.
As Udi once told me, is that if something is on live, it will be there forever. So don't worry.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I'm just gonna have to change all of my API keys. All right. So let's start with Gitpod for those Gitpodders out here. So you can see it actually lets me know that I have uncommitted change, which is pretty cool. But here I am. I'm just starting Gitpod from the little bits of Buddha, right? So I showed you little bits of Buddha, and you so if you scroll down, I really like good readmes. So what I did was I created a good readme with buttons to all of the CDEs that my repo supports, right? And so my repository supports Gitpod, it supports GitHub Codespaces, it supports DevBox. And so what we're looking at here is Gitpod pulling the container image because I've pre-built it. And it should launch into basically a web browser version of Visual Studio Code. Now, you can also launch Gitpod environments into your Visual Studio Code environment directly. And Codespaces also supports that, which is, you can see I have one here. I have two actually, and one is active. And so you can see here in the more actions, I can choose which IDE I want to open the code space in. So what we can do is we can open, and you can see that it'll say, oh, we're opening Visual Studio Code, and that tells my code instance on my local machine to run it, right, the code space. And then you might be surprised, like I think some people might think of cloud development environments as, I will present again, because I just want to show you, show you the code spaces. Yeah.
So before Tao sharing his screen, like it's good to mention that it's not a hard, like Tao got a lot of good things to show us, but if you want to give it a try, you basically can do it right now. Like go to any, most of the open source repositories at the for GitHub Codespaces, you will just click on the right side and I think on the clone or contribute or something, and then you will be able to use Codespaces for that. So you can give it a trial while we're doing that, or while you're watching the video offline.
Yes, let's actually go. So I'm gonna show. I'll just share my entire screen. Screen one. No. Screen two. Okay.
If you're using Telegram and you also want a daily hit of Buddhist wisdom, you can find Tao's repo in the comments.
Oops. Okay. Yes, indeed. Share screen. So, all right. Well, I'm just going to share this window again. So for the Git potters out there, you can see that my workspace, they call it a workspace, is running. And now I can open this workspace on my desktop through VS Code, but instead what I'll do with the Git pod example, so Git pod supports all of the same things that CodeSpaces does, including opening essentially a VS Code, actually a VS Code instance in the web browser. Right, so here you can see I have a VS Code instance, and it's in my web browser. So, like, let's say, for example, that you are on a Chromebook, you could actually just dev just like you do on your MacBook or your Windows PC or your Linux machine. And you can see here's this here's the Docker file for creating my my set of services that use. And here you can actually see that I'm using ChainGuard. I'm using ChainGuard's latest Python image, which you should never do. But ChainGuard only allows you to use the latest tag if you're not a paying customer. So I couldn't pin it to a Python version. But again, this is just my giant playground for technology. And so, I can go ahead and I can make a change. This is a garden file. Let's go into some source. And so you can see I have two Python services here. And you could, I don't know, import hello, right? And then, I could save this and then I could, go here. In this case, I just have a change to my settings.json file, and then I could commit. Here's my import pillow, and I could commit this, right? So it's all from the web browser. I have everything that I need to be productive, including all of these extensions. So Kodi, my black formatter, MyPy for Python, Rough, everything that you would need as a developer to get going. So that's that example. I want to point out that Gitpod has had an open feature request, and Gitpodders out there, if you're listening to me, we want dev container support. So Gitpod has its own definition file, right? I've set up my repo to provide both a Gitpod YAML file and a dev container .json file. But yeah, Gitpod has an open feature request from users, and I know that they're looking into it, and I know that there's interest from Gitpod to support it. But as far as I know, please correct me if I'm wrong, Gitpodders, that support has not yet arrived. So you still do need to kind of have these two if you want to have both.
Yeah. So it's not it's the technology is not abstracted from the configuration at the moment.
Yeah.
So if you're using one pick, you need your configuration file to be matched to it.
Yeah.
Cool. So, what other options out there? So we talked about CodeSpace, GitHub CodeSpaces, Gitpod.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So some of the other options are there's one called Coder, which is that is basically bring your own infrastructure. So and that can be useful, as on the Coder website, they actually, if you scroll down the Coder page, you'll see that they talk about this shorter transit route, right, between your resources and where they're ultimately going to be deployed. Because let's say that you bring your own Amazon infrastructure, right, and you're pushing to an Elastic Container Registry. then the image just needs to stay within the same data center, so you can be pushing multi-gigabyte image files pretty quickly. So that's one of the advantages of a sort of self-hosted approach, right? So we can scroll down, and we should see bring code closer to resources, right?
Yeah, this is really amazing. I think also maybe from the security perspective that can help too, to reduce some of the risks.
Yeah, right. Let's say that you're working in a highly restricted environment. Your security team is probably going to want to own the infrastructure that this is running on, right? So that also satisfies that demand.
I have to say, I really like the replace onboarding time with coding time. It really emphasized the value of the product and what you're going to get, like out of using those. So that's pretty great. I think that we covered a lot of aspects and areas around dev containers. Tao, is there any other thing that you would like to share with us today? I think you teach us a lot about cloud dev environment. And I think for me, as all the others, we have a lot of homework to do.
I can't believe it's almost an hour. I've just been we've just been talking about CDEs. It's great. So it went by in a blink.
Yeah, and there's still so much more to talk about. We didn't even mention the commercial options. Shout out to our friends from Octeto. Check them out.
Yeah, and we didn't really show code spaces, but it's more or less the same as what you saw with Gitpod, just these different configuration files, right? So yeah, I think I would the last thing I would state is to urge our viewers and developers out there not to fear cloud development environments. There's more than one way to skin a cat, right? As the saying goes. It's you're really, I think it's possible to tap into an array of technologies to help solve developer problems. I try and solve developer problems every day that I come into work. It's what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about enabling developers to do their best work as frustration-free as possible. That's what gets me excited to go to work every day is solving real developer frustrations. And reducing onboarding time for a project might rank pretty high for you in your in your company. I take advantage of all of these technologies. I use Nix locally for to set up like my whole computer how I like it. I can define a single Nix file that determines all of the environment variables for my local system, all of the packages that are installed. I just list them all in one giant list, right? Instead of having to like type brew install XYZ. And then I can share that with all of the other developers at the Lego group, and they can consume it and they can change it to fix their environment. So I use all of these and I enjoy them. And at the end of the day, we're just, we're all just trying to unlock the potential of our developers, and it doesn't need to be one or the other. So don't fear it, embrace it, test it out.
Yeah,
amazing
I
message.
think that, I think Lydia wanted to say you something. So it may mean that
how long ago was that feature request created? And only now on the platformers live.
How great would it be
we have made progress.
That issue gets closed today because of this this platformer?
That would be amazing.
Like one question before we are saying thank you for everyone. So last question for today. It raised like 15 minutes ago, but it was during almost during the demo, so I wanted to mention that. So I had a recent conversation with a dev who said that they didn't like the idea of CDs because they are, either way, the tools the dev need to know how to use for a project. What do you think about this stance? By the
I've
way,
heard
it
this a
also
lot.
tied into the illustration thing that you said.
Interesting. I mean, does a developer need to know how to install a tool to be aware of what it can do? I mean, I don't see this. I'm not convinced by this argument myself. I think that the only thing that you're doing is just bringing the tool to the developer faster. So, the dev still needs to learn the tool, whether they install it through Homebrew locally or whether it's determined for them. I would expect that I can see the argument for developers for the tool becoming invisible, or like the tool belt of tools becoming invisible because their environment is just spawned and then they never even encounter the tool. But in that case, I would say that your solution would be document, make sure that the tools are available to the developer are documented in the README, in the docs for the project, so that the developer, there's really it's just putting the burden on the documentation, which you should be writing anyway, to introduce the developer to the tools they have available to them.
Yeah, and I have to say one thing. Like, sometimes it doesn't have to. I don't think like installing or managing some of the tools is a good thing to be expert at, but even reducing like a lot of the work and make it abstracted for them and make them develop fast and easier. I don't think it draw any things from being a good developer. It's just the other way around. They can be better developer if they develop more and have more expertise in that.
I think this type of thinking is more like a relic of the past, when software engineers were expected to really know their shit and like read the C++ manual and like really understand everything. But nowadays, there's just too much for any developer to know. So it's impossible to expect them to have like that same level of knowledge for the wide range of responsibilities and things that they need to know now. So I think the way the industry is going is abstraction and simplifying the experience. Like we talked at the start of the show about Linux. I think this is what people are expecting, like a Heroku type of experience where they don't need to think about what they're doing. They can focus like on the actual task and not have that all that cognitive overload of understanding the nitty-gritty of the tooling behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and in throughout software history, we've just built new abstractions, right? And that's allowed us, like, developers don't need to know the internals of how the Linux kernel works to do effective work. So we're just providing these levels of abstraction, and further specializing, which is what humans are good at, right?
And on that note, 0011001111.
Yeah. So just to, like, I have to say, first of all, thank you for the audience for joining and being so active in the session. It gave me a lot of interest to hear your question and your thoughts around CDEs. And Tao, like, thank you very much for joining us today. I think that your expertise and your knowledge around CDEs and development environment in general really made a difference of this session. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you in. And the passion.
It's all motivated out of
love
for the developer. So I love developers. I love giving them the best possible experience, and that's where this obsession, let's say, comes from.
This is what being platformer is all about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good obsession to have, and that's why we love you, and developers everywhere love you too, Tao. And thanks for joining us, and thanks everyone else for being so engaged. And we'll see you next week. Guy, what do we have next week?
So next week we are going to talk about Kubernetes contribution, how to contribute to Kubernetes, where to start from. So we are going to have Kathleen Fields and Carl Santana, both of them are CNCF ambassadors, and they're going to walk us through Kubernetes development, the holy grail of Kubernetes development. So join us next week too.
Awesome.
Bye,
Bye
everyone.
everyone, and thanks, Tao.
Bye, everybody.